Hello, my name is Professor Koshnick, and this video corresponds to English 526, Advanced Professional Writing. In this brief video, I want to follow up with first week's work, as I hope I made clear in the syllabus and in that first introductory video. The goal of 526 is twofold. The first is conceptual. It is to prompt you to think about professional writing, the context and situations in which it happens. And that involves reading some theory about it and reflecting on your own experiences. The second is applied. It is to have you actually develop and draft what I call a convincing research proposal by the end of the term. One thing I really wanted to emphasize in this brief video is that the first 4 weeks in particular is necessarily a preliminary discovery process where you try out some different options. There's no way that you'll know whether a research problem is worth your time, let alone worth others' time, unless you're willing to do some background legwork to try out some different options and to think about the implications of pursuing a topic and a problem over the term. So just let me emphasize that this work is necessarily tentative and a bit messy to start. Well, you have probably some ideas in mind given the first week's prompts. I fully expect that most of you either need to or are still thinking about different options. Just let me point out that this is necessarily difficult and complex, and any stress you might be feeling about it is probably fairly natural at this point. As a matter of fact, if you weren't stressed about it, then there's probably reason for concern. And the second thing I really wanted to emphasize in this video and spend a bit of time talking about, a few minutes, is the idea of a legitimate research problem. What is it? A legitimate research problem requires that you think intently about the proposal project in terms of your current, future, or potential academic and career goals. This is distinct from thinking about problems in the abstract sense, like a research topic. Instead, it's important that you think about what aligns to some degree with your current academic or future career path. Think, for example, in terms of a potential capstone project for your current graduate degree. We'll address capstone projects in a bit more detail later in the term. But the question is, so what is a research-worthy problem? There are at least 3 primary areas that you must understand and address to find a problem that is worth your time, to define, to defend, and to sell to others. The first is your audience. You have to understand or learn what are the leading edges of the fields in which you will be working. Those in these fields, whatever they happen to be, are necessarily your audience. And so you have to figure out what this audience, what this problem, to what audience this problem corresponds. And you have to figure out what this audience or this field that you'll be working in already assumes about the research problem you're taking on. And you have to figure out what they have already written, what research they have already done, and what they've already said about this problem in previous literature. So this requires, of course, that you write and conduct a literature review, that you're able to describe the leading edges of the field accurately, and to connect your current problem or your perspective on it against that previous or current perspective. If you can't do that, you're working in isolation, and no research problem, successful research problem, is convincing if it does not reference work already done. The second area that's really critical to think about, as I mentioned briefly to start, is what are your personal interests and experience? Since most of you will be starting from essentially scratch, it's really important that you think about previous experience, knowledge that you already have, and knowledge that in a way makes you, has prepared you for the problem you want to address. You have to have some perspective from which advantages you in some way. It'd be very difficult to come up with a research proposal on a topic that you haven't thought about or worked on in some capacity before. So what part of your life and expertise will you be calling on? What personally has motivated you in the past? Is this something you've worked on for years? Is this something fairly new to you? What in your background gives you some advantage in addressing certain problems that others might not? But as important, do these motivating forces and areas of knowledge relate to or advance your academic or professional standing in some manner? Can you say how? And the third area is your role in the community in and for which you are working on this problem. As I mentioned, research proposals are not worked on in vacuums. They're not things people do in the abstract. This third realm brings the previous two realms together in many potential ways. Your job is to know the where, the what, the why, and the how so. Not all aspects of the following will ultimately be a part of your proposal narrative, but you'll have to understand these things, and it takes time and work in order to be able to fashion the framing perspective through which you, the researcher and writer, are quote-unquote selling both yourself and the potential results of your future research. The most important word for this third realm is strategic. Are you making intentional and strategic choices about what you are proposing to do and why you are proposing to do it? Also, what will result? Are you being honest about your background, your opportunities, your access, your roles as a researcher? What do you have access to that others do not? This is a really important question to ask and to attempt to answer. Perhaps you have access to materials or participants that others don't. What kind of materials do you plan to study? What kind of people might you interview or survey? Another aspect is institutional support. Do you have support from others around you, either at your workplace or in the academic setting? And how can you take advantage of this institutional support? Time. How much time do you have? Not just week to week, but given the scope of the project you envision, how much time will it really take you to produce a meaningful result? Methods we will talk about in some detail. There's no way across a given 13 to 15 week term, as we're currently in, that we can address all potential methods that you could take up. Many of you, as you know, will be working in different fields, and there are a wide variety of quantitative and qualitative methods you could use. None of you will be experts unless you've had experience, and I know some of you have, with different research methods before. But this proposal will ask you to think about what you could use to strategize, about what methods and either a quantitative or qualitative approach or mixed methods approach that you can or should take up and describe in your proposal. And one other one that I want to mention for now, and there are other aspects that it's important that you think about strategically, but what outlet do you imagine will either publishing or in-house, professional or nonprofit, who will benefit and how will you get your results to those people? What outlet do you have in mind? It's important to think about that as well. When I lecture about these things, the word alignment comes up a great deal. You could talk about it in terms of strategic alignment. It's difficult to find research problems that align across these three primary realms. Your own background, your own interests, your professional commitments, your academic commitments. So for a problem, if you can't identify the audience to which it corresponds and sell why they should be interested in a manner that they will value, you're not going to have a quote-unquote convincing research proposal. If something doesn't motivate you personally, and you don't know why you're interested in it and can't explain it clearly, you're not going to have a convincing research proposal. If such a proposal and the eventual research doesn't help you confirm, establish, or advance your academic professional career in some manner, and you don't understand how or why that would be the case, you're not going to really have a reason to follow through with what you propose to do research on. So in general, it takes time to consider who who are you when you'll be conducting this research? What is your role? What are you doing and for whom? Whom will benefit? The answer to these types of questions need to be as concrete as possible. But you have to also realize that your answer to these questions will change as you work, not just on the proposal, but the actual research down the line. You have to be engaged, diligent, and you have to anticipate these things, but also realize that your answers to these types of questions will evolve as you work on the proposal. There are many quote-unquote working parts, and like a surgeon, you have to be willing to work on them as the project lives and moves. And so, as you'll notice in the materials I provide this week, I offer us a Venn diagram that sort of says there are three different areas. There's your knowledge of your audience, there are your own goals, and there's your role in the community. And the area in between that overlaps, that's the strategic spot of alignment that you have to try to hit as best as possible to develop a convincing research proposal and to have the motivation and reasons to actually pursue it. It is also critical that you realize that being realistic is key. Most who take this class at the beginning are very unrealistic about the complexity of the problems they are pursuing, the questions they're asking, and the types and numbers of participants and materials they might or might not have access to as a researcher. Realism and pragmatism are much better selling points in a proposal than unrealistic ambition. Readers and audiences for proposals can, I think, quite quickly pick out somebody who's not being realistic, and that's a key aspect to keep in mind. Am I being realistic? So when you write a proposal that tries to sell and justify future research, you're really working to earn the trust of those to whom you will submit the proposal. Knowing what you cannot do is often more important than knowing what is possible. Trust is earned often when you're able to say what might be ideal but propose smaller steps towards that larger effort. So this first week's work was a start. The research questions and problems that you identified were meant as a sort of initial brainstorming exercise, but it is worth too much time and attention. But before what you proposed or thinking about is worth your time and attention from not just your classmates but from me. You need to consider the implications of what pursuing them will mean down the line. I had a few other things I was going to include in this video, but I think that's enough for now.